Good morning, friends. Happy Tuesday. Bassie is here with me this morning. Yeah, I changed it a couple weeks ago, Susan, that new screen. I had to create a new one because the application changed. Woo, girls. She's a hefty read this morning. All right, my friends. Athaliah rules in Judah, 2 Kings 11, 1 through 13. When Athaliah, the mother of King Ahaziah of Judah, learned that her son was dead, she began to destroy the rest of the royal family. But Ahaziah's sister, Jehosheba, the daughter of King Jehoram, took Ahaziah's infant son, Joash, and stole him away from among the rest of the king's children who were about to be killed. She put Joash and his nurse in a bedroom, and they hid from Athaliah, so the child was not murdered. Joash remained hidden in the temple of the Lord for 6 years, while Athaliah ruled over the land. 2 Chronicles 22, 10 through 12. When Athaliah, the mother of King Ahaziah of Judah, learned that her son was dead, she began to destroy the rest of Judah's royal family. But Ahaziah's sister, Jehosheba, the daughter of King Jehoram, took Ahaziah's infant son, Joash, and stole him away from among the rest of the king's children, who were about to be killed. She put Joash and his nurse in a bedroom. In this way, Jehosheba, wife of Jehoiada the priest and sister of Ahaziah, hid the child so that Athaliah could not be murdered. Joash remained hidden in the temple of God for 6 years, while Athaliah ruled over the land. Revolt against Athaliah, 2 Kings 11, 4 through 12. In the 7th year of Athaliah's reign, Jehoiada the priest summoned the commanders of the Karite mercenaries and the palace guards to come to the temple of the Lord. He made a solemn pact with them and made them swear an oath of loyalty there in the Lord's temple. Then he showed them the king's son. Jehoiada told them, "This is what you must do. A third of you who are on duty on the Sabbath are to guard the royal palace itself. Another third of you are to stand guard at the Sur Gate, and a final third must stand guard behind the palace guard. These 3 groups will guard the palace. The other 2 units who are off duty on the Sabbath must stand guard for the king at the Lord's temple. Form a bodyguard around the king and keep your weapons in hand. Kill anyone who tries to break through. Stay with the king wherever he goes." So the commanders did everything as Jehoiada the priest ordered. The commanders took charge of the men reporting for duty that Sabbath, as well as those who were going off duty. They brought them all to Jehoiada the priest, and he supplied them with spears and small shields that had once belonged to King David and were stored in the temple of the Lord. The palace guards stationed themselves around the king with weapons ready. They formed a line from the south side of the temple around the north side, and all around the altar. Then Jehoiada brought out Joash, the king's son, and placed the crown on his head, and presented him with a copy of God's laws. They anointed him and proclaimed him king, and everyone clapped their hands and shouted, "Long live the king." 2 Chronicles 23, 1 through 11. In the 7th year of Athaliah's reign, Jehoiada the priest decided to act. He summoned his courage and made a pact with the 5 army commanders: Azariah, son of Jehoram, Ishmael, son of Jehohanan, Azariah, son of Obed, and Messiah, son of Adaiah, and Elishaphat, son of Zichri. These men traveled secretly through Judah and summoned the Levites and clan leaders in all the towns to come to Jerusalem. They all gathered at the temple of God, where they made a solemn pact with Joash, the young king. Jehoiada said to them, "Here is the king's son. The time has come for him to reign. The Lord has promised that a descendant of David will be our king. This is what you must do. When you priests and Levites come on duty on the Sabbath, a third of you will serve as gatekeepers. Another third will go over to the royal palace, and a final third will be at the foundation gate. Everyone else should stay in the courtyards of the Lord's temple. Remember, only the priests and Levites on duty may enter the temple of the Lord, for they are set apart as holy. The rest of the people must obey the Lord's instructions and stay outside. You Levites form a bodyguard around the king and keep your weapons in hand. Kill anyone who tries to enter the temple. Stay with the king wherever he goes." So the Levites and all the people of Judah did everything as Jehoiada the priest ordered. The commanders took charge of the men reporting for duty that Sabbath, as well as those who were going off duty. Jehoiada the priest did not let anyone go home after their shift ended. Then Jehoiada supplied the commanders with the spears and the large and small shields that had once belonged to King David and were stored in the temple of God. He stationed all the people around the king and their weapons ready, with their weapons ready. They formed a line from the south side of the temple around to the north side and all around the altar. Then Jehoiada and his sons brought out Joash, the king's sons, and placed the crown on his head and presented him with a copy of God's law. They anointed him and proclaimed him king, and everyone shouted, "Long live the king." The death of Athaliah. 2 Kings 11:13 through 16. When Athaliah heard the noise made by the palace guards and the people, she hurried to the Lord's temple to see what was happening. When she arrived, she saw the newly crowned king standing in his place of authority by the pillar, as was the custom at times of coronation. The commanders and trumpeters were surrounding him, and people from all over the land were rejoicing and blowing trumpets. When Athaliah saw all this, she tore her clothes in despair and shouted, "Treason! Treason!" Then Jehoiada the priest ordered the commanders who were in charge of the troops, "Take her to the soldiers in front of the temple and kill anyone who tries to rescue her." For the priest had said, "She must not be killed in the temple of the Lord." So they seized her and led her out to the gate where the horses enter the palace grounds, and she was killed there. 2 Chronicles 23:12 through 15. When Athaliah heard the noise of the people running and the shouts of praise to the king, she hurried to the Lord's temple to see what was happening. When she arrived, she saw the newly crowned king standing in his place of authority by the pillar at the temple entrance. The commander and trumpeters were surrounding him, and people from all over the land were rejoicing, blowing trumpets. Singers with musical instruments were leading the people in a great celebration. When Athaliah saw all of this, she tore her clothes in despair and shouted, "Treason! Treason!" Then Jehoiada the priest ordered the commanders who were in charge of the troops, "Take her to the soldiers in front of the temple and kill anyone who tries to rescue her. For the priest has said, she must not be killed in the temple of the Lord." So they seized her and led her out to the entrance of the horse gate on the palace grounds, and they killed her there. Jehoiada's religious reform, 2 Kings 11:17 through 21. Then Jehoiada made a covenant between the Lord and the king and the people that they would be the Lord's people. He also made a covenant between the king and the people. And all the people of the land went over to the temple of Baal and tore it down. They demolished the altars and smashed the idols to pieces, and they killed Matan, the priest of Baal, in front of the altar. Jehoiada the priest stationed guards at the temple of the Lord. Then the commander, the Karaite mercenaries, and palace guards, and all the people of the land escorted the king from the temple of the Lord. Then they went through the gate of the guards and into the palace, and the king took his seat on the royal throne. So all the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was peaceful because Athaliah had been killed at the king's palace. Joash was 7 years old when he became king. 2 Chronicles 23:16 through 21. Then Jehoiada made a covenant between himself and the king and the people that they would be the Lord's people. And all the people went over to the temple of Baal and tore it down. They demolished the altars and smashed the idols, and they killed Matan, the priest of Baal, in front of the altars. Jehoiada now put the priests and Levites in charge of the temple of the Lord, following all the directions given by David. He also commanded them to present burnt offerings to the Lord as prescribed by the law of Moses, and to sing and rejoice as David had instructed. He also stationed gatekeepers at the gates of the Lord's temple to keep out those who, for any reason, were ceremonially unclean. Then the commanders, nobles, rulers, and all the people of the land escorted the king from the temple of the Lord. They went through the upper gate and into the palace, and they seated the king at the royal throne. So all the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was peaceful because Athaliah had been killed. Joash rules in Judah, 2 Kings 12:1 through 16. Joash began to rule over Judah in the 7th year of King Jehu's reign in Israel. He reigned in Jerusalem for 40 years. His mother was Zibiah from Beersheba. All of his life, Joash did what was pleasing in the Lord's sight because Jehoiada the priest instructed him. Yet, even so, he did not destroy the pagan shrines, and the people still offered sacrifices and burned incense there. One day, King Joash said to the priest, "Collect all the money brought as sacred offerings to the Lord's temple, whether it is a regular assessment, a payment of vows, or a voluntary gift. Let the priest take some of that money to pay for whatever repairs are needed at the temple. But by the 23rd year of Joash's reign, the priests still had not repaired the temple. So King Joash called for Jehoiada and all the other priests and asked them, "Why haven't you repaired the temple? Don't use any more money for your own needs. From now on, it must all be spent on temple repairs." So the priests agreed not to accept any more money from the people, but they also agreed to let others take responsibility for repairing the temple. Then Jehoiada the priest bored a hole in the lid of a large chest and set it on the right side of the altar at the entrance of the temple of the Lord. The priest guarding the entrance put all of the people's contributions into the chest. Whenever the chest became full, the court secretary and the high priest counted the money that had been brought to the Lord's temple and put it in bags. Then they gave the money to the construction supervisors, who used it to pay the people working on the Lord's temple: the carpenters, the builders, the masons, and the stonecutters. They also used the money to buy the timber and also finished stone needed for repairing the Lord's temple, and they paid any other expenses related to the temple's restoration. The money brought to the temple was not used for making silver bowls, lamps, snuffers, basins, trumpets, or other articles of silver or of gold or silver for the temple of the Lord. It was paid to the workmen, who used it for the temple repairs. No accounting of this money was required from the construction supervisors because they were honest and trustworthy men. However, the money that was contributed for guilt offerings and sin offerings was not brought into the Lord's temple. It was given to priests to use for their own. 2 Chronicles 24, 1-16. Joash was 7 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem for 40 years. His mother was Zibiah from Beersheba. Joash did what was pleasing in the Lord's sight throughout his lifetime throughout the lifetime of Jehoiada the priest. Jehoiada chose 2 wives for Joash, and he had sons and daughters. At one point, Joash decided to repair and restore the temple of the Lord. He summoned the priests and Levites and gave them these instructions: "Go to all the towns of Judah and collect the required annual offerings so that we can repair the temple of your God. Do not delay." But the Levites did not act immediately. So the king called for Jehoiada the high priest and asked him, "Why haven't you demanded that the Levites go out and collect the temple taxes from the towns of Judah and from Jerusalem?" Moses, the servant of the Lord, levied this tax on the community of Israel in order to maintain the tabernacle of the covenant. Over the years, the followers of wicked Athaliah had broken into the temple of God, and they had used all the dedicated things from the temple of the Lord to worship the images of Baal. So now the king ordered a chest to be made and set outside the gate leading to the temple of the Lord. Then a proclamation was sent throughout Judah and Jerusalem, telling the people to bring the Lord the tax that Moses, the servant of God, required. Telling the people to bring to the Lord the tax that Moses, the servant of God, had required of the Israelites in the wilderness. This pleased all the leaders and the people, and they gladly brought their money and filled the chest with it. Whenever the chest became full, the Levites would carry it to the king's officials. Then the court secretary and the officer of the high priest would come and empty the chest and take it back to the temple again. This went on day after day, and a large amount of money was collected. The king and Jehoiada gave the money to the construction supervisors, who hired masons and carpenters to restore the temple of the Lord. They also hired metal workers, who made articles of iron and bronze for the Lord's temple. The men in charge of the renovation worked hard and made steady progress. They restored the temple of God according to its original design and strengthened it. When all the repairs were finished, they brought the remaining money to the king and Jehoiada. It was used to make various articles for the temple of the Lord, articles for worship services and for burnt offerings, including ladles and other articles made of gold and silver. And the burnt offerings were sacrificed continually in the temple of the Lord during the lifetime of Jehoiada the priest. Jehoiada lived to a very old age, finally dying at 130. He was buried among the kings in the city of David, because he had done so much good in Israel for God and his temple. Jehoiada's reforms reversed. 2 Chronicles 24, 17-22. But after Jehoiada's death, the leaders of Judah came and bowed before King Joash and persuaded him to listen to their advice. They decided to abandon the temple of the Lord, the God of their ancestors, and they worshipped Asherah poles and idols instead. Because of this sin, divine anger fell on Judah and Jerusalem. Yes, the Lord sent prophets to bring them back. The prophets warned them, but still the people would not listen. Then the Spirit of God came upon Zechariah, son of Jehoiada the priest. He stood before the people and said, "This is what God says. Why do you disobey the Lord's commands and keep yourselves from prospering? You have abandoned the Lord, and now he has abandoned you." Then the leaders plotted to kill Zechariah, and King Joash ordered that they stone him to death in the courtyard of the Lord's temple. That was how King Joash repaid Jehoiada for his loyalty, by killing his son. Zechariah's last words as he died were, "May the Lord see what they are doing and avenge my death." The death of Jehu, 2 Kings 10:32 through 36. At about that time, the Lord began to cut down the size of Israel's territory. King Hazael conquered several sections of the country east of the Jordan River, including all of Gilead, Gad, Reuben, and Manasseh. He conquered the area from the town of Arior by the Arnon Gorge to as far north as Gilead of Bashan. The rest of the events in Jehu's reign, everything he did, and all of his achievements are recorded in the book of the history of the kings of Israel. When Jehu died, he was buried in Samaria. Then his son Jehoahaz became the next king. In all, Jehu reigned over Israel from Samaria 28 years. You are just being a troublemaker. It's what you are. All right. You're on page 74, starting in the last paragraph. Okay, well, there. Rip part of the book right out. Getting a little aggressive over here. All right. As we begin to break some chains and ties with the lies that have come our way, with the names that have been wrongly spoken over us, with the authority others have taken unjustly in our lives, here are 3 truths to anchor you when misnaming comes your way. Words hold power. Words hold whatever power we give them. The truth can feel out of reach for children or for those who are vulnerable to submission and authority. No. Drop the toy. No. But many of us now have the space and authority to at least begin rejecting the messages from those who are not in authority positions over us, and we can ask God to heal the wounds of our past. This takes time, and for many of us, it takes help from a counselor or a pastor. I also believe it will take prayer. You have as little to fear from an undeserved curse as from the dart of a wren or the swoop of a swallow, Proverbs 26:2. I love this verse from Proverbs. An undeserved curse, a negative name that we don't allow to permeate into our souls, can be obnoxious and annoying without being destructive and deadly. Right off the bat, I entreat you to see any damaging words from anyone you don't belong to as a really frustrating bird. Yes, it might fly in your face temporarily, but it is never going to take you out. You are much stronger than it ever could be. Number 2, you may have to remove yourself from the space where the words are spoken. This is a little trickier. Again, there are countless situations wherein this may not be possible. You may be in a long-term relationship with those who don't use their words in God's way. No. Go. Hey. No. Stop. Lay down. Sebastian. Lay down. No. Lay down. No. Oh my word. Go lay down. You're going to knock over my computer. Get. Go lay down. You may be in a long-term relationship with those who don't use their words in God's way. You may be in work situations with those who participate in misnaming, but many of us willingly place ourselves in communities where speaking about our bodies negatively is normal and acceptable. In those cases, we are volunteering to belong, but we don't have to. You can walk away from a conversation where anyone's body is being disparaged. You can use your voice to change the conversation. You can choose to no longer surround yourself with people who have such conversations if, after using your voice, they refuse to stop misnaming others. There are many situations where We cannot control what is spoken over us and must go to God to help us rename what has been bruised. But often it's as simple as saying, I no longer belong here. Number 3, we have to remember who we belong to. We won't have the tenacity, boldness, or faith to respond to any of these situations if we don't have a clear kingdom-minded mentality. Your body is not the world's, but whose is it? We touched a little on this in chapter 2, but let's revisit the basics for emphasis and clarity. Many of us need to shake off disturbed feelings when we talk about belonging to the kingdom and family of God. So let's remember here that our Father is kind, good, and a benevolent King who doesn't need us to do his work or bidding because he is all powerful. He doesn't want to dictate what happens in our bodies. He's pro freedom. He created us, purchased freedom for us with the cross of Christ, and gave us the opportunity to live and worship and respond to him how we choose. You are making this very difficult. If you could see watch what he's doing. I don't know if he'll do it again, but all right. I don't know where I was. He's pro freedom. He created us, purchased freedom for us with the cross of Christ, and gave the opportunity to live and worship and respond to him how we choose. Galatians 5:1 says, "It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm, then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by the yoke of slavery." Galatians tells us that God doesn't give us freedom so that we'll love him more or so that we'll do what he wants us to do. God wants our freedom just because freedom is good, and he wants us to have every good thing in abundance through him. Romans 8:28 says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." Romans tells us that when we belong to God, he is always working out the details of our lives for good. He uses harm for healing. He allows pain to produce something in us. He has our best interest at heart. Belonging to God is nothing like belonging to a human, even the very best human there is, because a human can't love or lead or treat us the way he can. The more time we spend thinking about what it means to be a woman who lives in the kingdom, who is defined and named by her king, the more comfortable we'll get with belonging to the world and being labeled by it. The more time we spend learning about our kingdom rights and the capacities given to us through the power that raised Jesus Christ from the dead, the less we'll care about meeting the expectations of this world. How do we fight comparison, breaking the chains and avoiding the traps our culture has placed all around us? We know and speak the truth about who we are, who we belong to, and what that means for our lives. Oh my goodness. No, you still can't have it. Look at him. It's because I have his toy. He's being feisty this morning. Oh my goodness. Feisty turkey. You can knock over my computer. He just keeps giving it a nose, shoving it in the air with his nose. My mom was transferred to a new rehab center and is doing really well. There are even talks of her being able to go back to her own home in the near future. That's amazing, Sarah. That's amazing. All right. You lay down while we pray. It's time to pray. I need to teach you to bow your head. I know you can take a bow. I need to teach you to pray. All right, my friends, let's go ahead and end in prayer this morning. God, our Father, we thank you for this day, and we thank you for this opportunity to gather together and worship. And we thank you for your word. We thank you that we have the word available to us all day, every day. And the promises that are buried inside for us. And we just need to get in the word and read the word. And I thank you for each woman here that joins and is part of devotions. And I just pray that it is a blessing to many. God, I pray today for Sarah's mom, and thank you that she's going to a new rehab facility. Thank you that she's doing so well. Thank you that she may get to come home soon. And we just pray for continued healing for her and strength for the family. And I just pray that she will continue to improve so that she can go home quickly, God. And we just thank you and praise you for how well she's done. God, I just thank you for each woman here. Thank you for their faithfulness. And thank you, God, that thank you for each and every one of their journeys to health. And I pray that as we all travel this road together to getting healthy and to getting our minds in a place that you want them, in a place of loving our bodies and honoring them and honoring you with our choices. I just pray that you will help us all to remain in that, remain strong, remain focused on our goals, and remain focused on the fact that our eating habits can be a form of worship. And I pray that just help us to recognize that today, that everything that we choose to do with our bodies can be a form of worship to you, our King. I pray that you will just help us to share the love of Christ wherever we go today and be a picture of love for those we encounter. In your precious name, amen. He laid down. All right, my friends. Thank you. He hears, all right, my friends, and he knows that means I'm done, so he can have his toy. Do you want your cup of Joe? His Dunkin' cup. It's his favorite toy. He's just like his mommy. Oh, thank you, CJ. All right, my sweet friends. I will probably go. Let me look at my calendar. Let me check my calendar. Just make sure I don't have any meetings before I say I'll go live. What day is it? It's Tuesday. Look at that. I don't have any Zooms until 7 p.m. tonight. Nope, I have one at 3. We will make something for breakfast. I don't know what, but it will probably have bread because it will probably have bread because I have some sourdough that I want to use up because I'm whatever. You can't hear me. Yes, we are. We're cooking live tonight. Tonight is if you are not part. Hey. If you're not part of the free week of group coaching called 5 for Free, it's available on my website. You can still join. It's fine. joyfullifewithkj.com. Go to free events and offers and go to 5 for Free and register so that you'll get a link tonight for Zoom class. We're making red, white, and blueberry mini cheesecakes. Okay. You can. I can't, Mary. You may be able to hear, but I can't hear myself think. My head gets all like in knots when he's doing that. It's like there's somebody in there with knitting needles just going to town. All right, I'll make something. Maybe BLT sandwiches. We'll see. All right, I love you guys. I hope you have an amazing